The following is a presentation of the Belly Up Sports Media Network.
Let me just say, after Vera distorting the belt, they're proclaiming the real world champion. I'm going to tell you all, with a tear in my eye, this is the greatest moment in my life. When you walk around this world and you tell everybody you're number one, the only way you get to stay number one is to be number one.
Hey, good morning, everybody, and welcome to the Captain Lou Extravaganza. We are live here on the Captain Lou Sports Network on YouTube. And, of course, we are powered up by Belly Up Sports. And we invite you to check out our website, bellyupsports.com, for our complete list of podcasts and also the latest in what's going on in the world of sports with our beat writers, the guys and gals doing a wonderful job. And, of course, check us out at Belly Up Sports. And, again, you can watch us live and also archived on our YouTube channel, which is the Captain Lou Sports Network. And we got a great show planned for you here this morning. We got a lot to talk about. The Stanley Cup playoffs are down to the Final Four, and we got some great matchups. Maybe a couple that we weren't expecting, or one at least that we may not have been expecting, but nonetheless, it's going to be a great Final Four. And Rod Pedersen from the Rod Pedersen Show is going to join us here shortly to talk about that. Game one of the NBA playoffs in the Western Conference Finals are in the books. The Lakers tried to make a comeback, but the Nuggets held off. Just a fantastic game to watch. We'll talk about that a little bit later on as well. So again, we've got the Stanley Cup playoffs to talk about, what's going on in the world of the National Hockey League. And without any further ado, let's bring in our first guest from the Rod Pedersen Show. They just celebrated their 1,000th show, by the way. Fantastic. A lot of fun to watch. I invite you to watch them. Of course, that's Rod Pedersen, host of the Rod Pedersen Show. You can see them on the Game Plus TV network, their YouTube channel, and so much more. Rod, thanks for joining us this morning. How are you?
Hey, Lou, it's good. It's been far too long, buddy. How are things with you?
Oh, everything's great. You know, it's a beautiful morning. The sun's shining. Can't beat that. And, of course, we got the semifinals and the Stanley Cup playoffs down to the Final Four. Rod, Game 7 the other night with Dallas and the Kraken. They decided the final spot. Kind of a game that really wasn't like the other ones. The other ones was like the first one to 5, you know, and this one turned out to be a kind of low-scoring slugfest, if you will, but a heck of a goal by Dallas in the third period that turned out to be the difference.
Yeah, that was the goal by Wyatt Johnston. It's been just a great year of NHL hockey, Lou. You follow it, all kinds of records following, all kinds of new stars, and you see what Joe Pavelski did in that series. I think it was 8 goals Pavelski scored, and that was the most ever by any star in the history of one round. And, of course, in Dallas, they tend to forget they were in Minnesota for a long time before that. So that there was that, and then Wyatt Johnston with what you said was the game winner. And the other night, it was I came home from the movie Blackberry, and I only watched the third period, and it was all I needed to watch, really, because that's when they went up 2-0, and Wyatt Johnston scored that great goal. He went off the goalie's head into the top of the net, Grubauer's head. That made it 2-0, and then Seattle scored late in like the last minute with their goalie pull to make it a 2-1 game. But Wyatt Johnston is the youngest player in NHL history to score a Game 7 series-clinching goal. So it just follows just a wonderful season of NHL hockey, of unpredictable things. I mean, that's what we want. We don't want mundane. We don't want boring in the NHL season. And these playoffs have been anything but that.
You know, you mentioned that. That's a great point. Leads into the other series that decided this final, the Western Conference Final, Vegas and Edmonton. You know, maybe I'm just I don't know, looking for something like the past. A rivalry, yeah. I think it's starting to build. Vegas and Edmonton. You know what had transpired. Pietrangelo getting the game suspension. No love lost between those two. There was a lot of intrigue in that series, and I think this is starting to build. Maybe not yet to the Detroit, Colorado level of the 90s, but what a great series that was. And I honestly think maybe, Rod, I don't know about you, but the turning point may have been that suspension to Pietrangelo, and it really gave an extra rivalry or rally cry.
It looked like that might have been the case. But I mean, you talk about the Detroit, Colorado. I just think those days are never coming back. I wish they would, but it's just a different NHL now. But when I saw Pietrangelo with the slash on Draisaitl, I was like, whoa. Yeah. Like in the 80s and 90s, we called that Tuesday. Not a big deal. Now, I thought they might put him in jail for a couple of years. So for it to only be 1 game suspension, I kind of wonder, it's a topic for another day, but if the NHL's kind of lost their way in terms of not knowing what they are, it's like, do we want to be, and with woke, that's that it is what it is, but it's like, do we want to be the goon show that we were, or do we want to be all about skill now and skills competition? And is this Trevor Zegras' league now and Mo Sider and these guys? Like, what are we? Yeah. Because in the playoffs, what Pietrangelo did, that was a throwback. I don't have a problem with it, but I thought we were cracking down on this. So yeah, there was some heated things said back and forth, more so from the Edmonton media. Vegas really didn't have anything to complain about. And Vegas moves on. So it's interesting you mentioned the Final Four about which series was expected or what wasn't. Dallas, Vegas, if you really sat back and thought about it, that shouldn't be a surprise. That happened a couple of years ago in 2021. Or was it 2020? Either way, this isn't entirely new for Dallas and Vegas. It's very new for Florida. And Carolina hasn't historically gotten this far. So these are some pretty good Final Four matchups.
Now, real quick, again, on the Western Conference side, I think the big thing for Vegas is they gotta stay out of the penalty box. As simple as that sounds, Rod, I think that 5-on-5, I think they may be a little bit better than Dallas. The goaltending, I think, may have an edge towards Dallas, but I just I honestly think Vegas is a little more, the depth is a little better for Vegas than Dallas. I don't know what your feeling is going into that opening game.
Well, you make it this far, it's 2 really good teams.
Yeah.
And up until I moved to Florida a couple of years ago, Vegas was my team. So I'm pretty familiar with what they got going on. And going into the playoffs, nobody really even knew who Vegas's goalie was going to be. Was it going to be Laurent Brossoit? Was it going to be Aiden Hill? Was it going to be Jonathan Quick? Like, why did you acquire him at the trade deadline if you weren't going to play him? But they haven't, right? So the Vegas's crease has been a rotating carousel, which historically isn't what you'd want. But you mentioned the history. Jake Ottinger the other night, however many saves he made, he now put himself into number 2 all-time NHL history for saves made in Game 7 wins behind Kelly Rudy. Now, you and I are around the same age, so we appreciate those old names.
Yes, we do.
Right? So, again, guys are making history all over the National Hockey League. And as you said, we're going to get to the East. But I think Vegas and Dallas are both really good teams. Ottinger has just continued to make a name for himself. If it does come down to goaltending, and when the chips are down, it usually does. I mean, I just can't wait to get to the Florida talk, because that's why Sergei Bobrovsky is the reason why the Panthers are where they are. I would have to give Dallas the edge. But I actually picked a Vegas-Florida Stanley Cup last season, not this season. So I'm just telling my friends that I'm just so far ahead of my time that I was a year ahead on my prediction.
Well, one of the names, too, before we go to the Eastern Conference Final, Roope Hintz, kind of flown under the radar. It's not a name that I'm familiar with as much. And, he's played well. And I think that he's another one of my unsung heroes for Dallas going into the Western Conference Final.
They got a few. I'm not that familiar with Roope Hintz either. I mean, we don't get Dallas that much on television. And, I spend almost half my time in Calgary. So I was talking to the Flames broadcasters. They've been raving about Hintz for a while. And I said, I don't travel on the team with the team. I don't go to Dallas. So I don't know much about this Roope Hintz. All I know is he scores big goals. And a couple of years ago, I was forced as a sportscaster to learn how to say his name. I mean, how was saying this guy's name? right? Root, what nationality? Okay, he really came out of nowhere. But to be honest, Dallas has a lot of no names, if you will, like Jason Robertson's the next big thing. If you remember, he held out at training camp. He's had a pretty quiet playoff, but that's scary because that means he's ready to bust out at any time. And we have to remember, Lou, we're only halfway to the Stanley Cup. Yeah. We're down to Final Four, but there's 2 more series to win. 8 more wins for some team that's left, right? They're not there yet.
So let's go over to the Eastern Conference Finals for a moment. We've got obviously Carolina and Florida. Now, I picked an all-Canadian final, so I'm way off. Florida, Bobrovsky's getting hot. I mean, always knew his potential. And he didn't even start, Rod, to begin the playoffs. And now he's taking the ball and run with it, if you will. Interesting to watch his matchup because I love the balance. I love what Rod Brind'Amour is doing with Carolina. Give me your opening thoughts on what you think of this finals matchup, Eastern Conference final matchup.
Well, I think the Vegas-Dallas one is a great story for them, but this Eastern story, there's a lot more. I mean, I'm sitting here in South Florida just this morning. All they've been talking about is the Panthers. And let's not forget, the Heat are moving on to round 3 in the NBA playoffs. So if the Panthers are getting this much pub here, Paul Maurice, the first-year coach of the Panthers, used to coach Carolina, and because of that, used to coach Rod Brind'Amour, their coach. So the pundits here are giving Florida the edge in the mental aspect that Paul Maurice knows Brindy better. I don't know about that. You mentioned, I counted Florida out in December. I counted them out going into the playoffs, and I counted them out after round 1. And all they've done is laugh and stick it where the sun don't shine with everybody. They didn't make the playoffs until the final week of the regular season. They've been playing, if you've been watching the games, like absolute playing with house money, no pressure whatsoever. Not supposed to be this far. Whereas with Carolina, I think there's more pressure on them because they've been a good team for a long time. They're opening at home. You see the games in the PNC Center, their arena there. It's an absolute madhouse. It's getting exciting from here on in, but Carolina's roster is a bit of a dog's breakfast too. They got Freddie Anderson in goal, a goaltender who the Leafs put out to pasture a couple years ago because he wasn't good enough for them. All he's done is lead Carolina to the Stanley Cup Eastern Conference Final. So there's more storylines in my mind in the Eastern Final than the Western Final. And I've picked, by the way, I don't know if you're going to ask me, but I've picked Carolina to win in 7, and here's why. Because I've been wrong on every prediction with the Panthers so far. So I'm just hoping that they continue to prove me wrong.
I love the point you made about Florida playing on house money. Now, what really just irritates the holy hell out of me, Rod, is, Boston, they beat Boston in 7. They say, what did Boston do wrong? They beat Toronto in 5. What did Toronto do wrong? What are they always doing wrong? In my opinion, it was won by Florida because they got in their heads. I never saw as many talented teams play on their heels like Boston and Toronto did, especially on the blue line. And, in game 3, I was flummoxed by Toronto. And that to me was Maurice, instilling in these guys, him and Kachuk, they took it to him. And I don't think enough credit yet is still given to Florida.
No, it isn't. And I was at that game 3. I distinctly remember sitting in my seat, looking up at the score clock at the 10-minute mark of the second period. I'm like, the Leafs only have 7 shots. This vaunted Leafs team only has 7 shots. So, I don't know, Lou. I think you know that I work in the mental health addiction recovery field, and I'm very big on mental health and mental strength. And if people realize how much of it is right here. Boston probably psyched themselves up to a degree. And I don't like to repeat what I heard in the media, but I'll repeat what the voice of the Panthers, Steve Goldstein, said on the radio this morning here. Boston was the best regular season team in NHL history. Yeah. Okay. And the first couple of games, they ran the Panthers over. They ran them over. I'm watching this thing going, this series isn't going to be long. Right. But guess what? The Panthers stood up. They didn't back down. That was the big thing. It's called pushback. topic for another time, but that's been the big topic from the Winnipeg Jets coach, Rick Bowness, that they had no pushback against Vegas. Florida, they just wing. They're like those old clown dummies that you punch when you were a kid. You punched it and it popped right back up. That's Florida, right? We're not going away. And then with Toronto, I think the pressure got to Boston. I think the pressure got to Toronto because I saw those guys. I watched that game 3 from ice level, and I'm like, Matthews, Marner, Tavares, they were just emotionless robots. And it's not that they didn't care. I just felt like there was so much pressure on them to not make a mistake. And when that happens, you end up making more mistakes. And that's what happened with the Leafs. They're just having fun. And I noticed this way back before Christmas. The Panthers love each other. They love coming to the rink. They love their coach. It's very evident. You watch their games, they're smiling and laughing on the bench together. That's what you want. And that's what they have.
You know, it kind of reminded me of the Rocky movie with Florida. You know, when Rocky takes that punch, I think it was from Clubber Lang in Rocky 3, or maybe even in Rocky 2. He's like, you ain't so bad, you know, and they're like, what are you doing? And then he had that mindset, and just like, man, it's spot on about the Florida Panthers. We're joined by Rod Pedersen, host of the Rod Pedersen Show here on the Captain Lou Extravaganza on the Captain Lou Sports Network. We appreciate you taking time out this morning. All right, you know, you said you've got Carolina in 7. What is your big key in that matchup in the Eastern Conference Final?
Well, I don't get into analytics and stats. As a matter of fact, that annoys me because I think a lot of people do that. And people that rely on that kind of stuff just don't really understand the game. I mean, sure. When you say they need to stay out of the box, Vegas, you're right. Discipline's going to be key. Vegas was the least penalized team in the NHL in the regular season, and here they are going to the Western Conference Final. So discipline will be big. Florida's never really had a problem with that. The Hurricanes have Tara Vining coming back for the first time in these Stanley Cup playoffs. So it's going to be who stays the healthiest.
Okay.
There's no doubt about that. And literally, who wants it more? That's a good question. What are the keys? I just think if Florida just keeps doing what they're doing, and Bob can be good Bob, because I've seen bad Bob.
Yes.
They only have about a month left to squeeze this out of good Bob. They've been paying him $10.5 million. That's what got him here from Columbus. And what the Panthers people are saying to me is, yeah, he's been average the last couple of years, but if he leads us to the Stanley Cup, he's worth the money. And they're right. So the key I will say goaltending, and narrow it down to Florida's goalie, Sergei Bobrovsky. Can he stay on this run? It seems like he's going to.
Oh, I didn't get your pick on the Western Conference Final. Again, my thing with them is obviously part of it's goaltending. Like I said, I think Ottinger may have the edge, but, you know, Hill, I thought, played really well in the last couple of games. So, you know, it could change. You mentioned it. 8 more games left to win the Cup. Give me your pick in the Western Conference Final.
I have the Vegas Golden Knights winning the series in 6 games. Okay. That's probably short. It probably will go 7, but I've told everybody Vegas in 6, so I can't move off that. But the more that I look at both teams, that is a dang even series. Yeah. A very even series, but I'll take Vegas in 6.
All right, that's kind of where I'm leaning. I picked Dallas to go to the Western Conference Final against Edmonton, but obviously that's wrong. But so I guess I'll stick. I think Vegas has got just a little more firepower, and I think that could. I think that's going to win out in the end. Rod, I want to ask you about a few other things that are going on in the National Hockey League. We've got obviously what's going on up in Calgary. They're in flux. I know they're going to build a new stadium. The Saddle Dome is going to get. They're going to get improvements to that. I know it was a great facility and for a lot of years. But the team itself is in a little bit of turmoil right now. What's the pulse up there in Calgary?
Well, largely optimism, to be honest. It was a highly underachieving team, or lowly underachieving team, depending how you look at it. My original pick going into the season was a Calgary, Florida Stanley Cup. I knew the rosters very well on both sides, and Calgary didn't even make the playoffs. It led to the general manager being fired about 10 days after the season ended, and then 2 weeks after that, head coach Daryl Sutter being fired. Yeah, and it had to do a lot with today's NHL player and culture. They had, from what I'm told, year-end interviews with the players, and a lot of guys said, I didn't enjoy coming to the rink because of Daryl Sutter. And well, guess what? You're not going to fire 20 players, so you can only fire one coach, and that's what happened there. So I guess when I left Calgary, which was about 10 days ago, it was a sense of renewed optimism because we're getting a new arena. We're going to have a brand new general manager. We're going to have a brand new coach, and we've got a very talented team. It's a really good situation for somebody to walk into, right? That's the feel. The only sad thing is the general manager they fired, Brad Treliving, it was just learned earlier this week that the Flames aren't allowing him to speak to other teams until his contract officially expires June 30th. And I'm like, that doesn't help the culture thing you guys were talking about. You fired Daryl because of bad culture. Who are you going to blame this on? Yeah. So that's what's going on there.
I heard a name yesterday, and I've been hearing it, that is kind of starting to lurk as far as with these head coaching openings. Mike Babcock interviewed with Columbus, and I've heard rumors that the Blue Shirts might be interested in him. I didn't think Mike Babcock was going to come back, but, you know, the blood's always there. Once a coach, always a coach. You know, I don't blame him if he does. I don't see Mike Babcock as a fit in New York, but maybe Columbus. Are you a little surprised by hearing his name out there?
Buddy, number one, I'm never surprised. I should never be surprised. I mean, I was surprised. Yes, I was, but I shouldn't be because these things change all the time for a few reasons. But Mike Babcock said on my show a couple of years ago, I'm retired. I'm done. Yeah. He goes, I was going to retire at 60 anyways. 60. I'm 59 now, so sayonara. But I guess when that phone rings, you got to answer it. But this reminds me of Dave Tippett when he left Arizona after a really bad ending there with the Coyotes. Dave was, I'm done. I'm out. All of a sudden, the orders call. Dave, would you come and coach Connor McDavid? I'm there. So, and Daryl Sutter also told me that he was never going to coach again. I asked him if he would coach. This was after L.A. I said, would you ever coach again, Daryl? And he's like, well, if I only had to coach home games, maybe. And he ends up taking the Flames job. So I guess all we're learning here, Lou, is never say never.
There you go. Toronto and Edmonton, obviously it hurts up in Canada. I know how bad that they want a Stanley Cup, at least a team in there. It's been 30 years. I know, for example, Toronto, Austin Matthews, you know, he claims he wants to stay there. He's got 1 year left on his contract. Edmonton, I think, you know, both teams I think are close. Who's closest to the cup, and how devastating is it for the fan bases up there and Canada in general that they couldn't get a team yet to the final?
Well, for one, a lot of them are saying the fans of both those teams are not going to watch the rest of the Stanley Cup playoffs. I'll believe that when I see it. I was getting sucked into the hype of the Leafs-Oilers Stanley Cup final. And to be honest, I mean, you're sitting there in Michigan, right? Like I don't understand the mentality of USA hockey fans. And I'm not saying they're wrong. I just don't understand it. I don't understand baseball culture either. You know, I'm not part of it. But I'm like, an Edmonton-Toronto Stanley Cup final, to me, would be the greatest thing for the NHL. Connor McDavid versus Austin Matthews, the star power, the iconic franchises. Edmonton's not an original six team, but it might as well be. It's an iconic franchise. Why would that be a bad thing? And I guess we're not going to know because it's not happening. I would have loved to have seen the ratings in the United States for that. People are saying now with this all Sun Belt Final Four that people aren't going to watch. Let's just wait and see who does watch. Yeah. But when you say who's closer, I got to say Edmonton by using math. Their last Stanley Cup was 1990. Toronto's last Stanley Cup was 1967. And I think there's a reason the Leafs have faltered so much in the playoffs, and it is the pressure in the market. I mean, there's pressure in Edmonton, but Toronto's next level. They just can't seem to figure it out. You know, I thought the word was if they win a playoff round, everybody keeps their job. Well, they won a round, and they're still talking about getting rid of the general manager and the head coach. I think they literally can't decide what they're doing. Does that tell you that they're going to get their act together anytime soon?
I doubt it. I doubt it. It's a soap opera. But no, to your point about not wanting a Canadian final or two teams, I would love it. I think the energy in Edmonton and Toronto would be out of this world. And I think that would be great for the game of hockey.
Yeah, it would be infectious.
Yeah, I don't understand it. Speaking of that, the other end of the spectrum real quick, Arizona, the public referendum was defeated again. I know Bettman has a love affair, it seems like, with Arizona to try to keep a team there. Rod, a 5,000 seat arena to seat the Coyotes. My stepson lives down in Scottsdale, and he's gone to a couple of games there. They can't even fill that barn. What are their days really numbered in Arizona? And I don't think they could move this year, but
no.
How can they support it?
They would have to give at least a year's notice if they were to leave. So we can talk about this for at least a year.
Yeah.
But I had a friend who was part of the ownership group, that Ice Edge group, that the 10 Canadians that owned it from about 2013 to 2017. Mm-hmm. Gary Drummond's his name. And so I spent a lot of time down there with them. And what the Arizona people told me in the arena, like the born and raised Phoenicians, they're like, don't blame us that hockey hasn't worked in Phoenix. This team has been terrible ever since it got here, since 1996. Mm-hmm. It's a bad hockey market, a bad organization. We don't know whether it's a good hockey market or not. Like, let's try winning. Look at Florida. They're packing the barn every night. Place is going crazy. You think this is any more of a hockey market than Arizona? No. So you say, are the days numbered? There's only one guy that knows. And his name's Gary Bettman.
Right.
And why he has so steadfast. Maybe it's just the ego of refusing to admit that he was wrong, because he oversaw the move from the Winnipeg Jets to Arizona in 96. Maybe that's what it is. I don't know. It's going to be a poll question on our show today. What should the Coyotes do? Move to Houston? Move to Quebec City? Move to Saskatoon, because they still talk about that? Or stay in Arizona? Yeah. I'm not totally sure what my vote would be. I'm kind of leaning towards staying in Arizona because it's a great place. And I just think if they could get their act together, it would work. But they can't get their act together. So,
hey, Rod, I really appreciate you coming on today. I wanted to congratulate you on 1,000 shows.
Thank you.
One of the things that I love about your show is you guys seem to have so much fun on there. And there's a lot to be said for that. We both know what it takes to produce a good show, and you guys don't miss a beat. And that to me is amazing.
Thank you, Lou. Well, we have a wonderful team backing it. I mean, my name's on it, but it's not just me, and I feel bad that I feels like I'm the one getting all the credit. But this business was supposed to be fun. And when we got into it, and most of the people that I'm talking with now that work in the mainstream media aren't having a whole lot of fun. And I'm like, I'm not going to do it if I'm not having fun. So it's sort of like the more we do it, the more I lean into it, because, people like you notice it. I think that's infectious too, man. So I appreciate that.
One last question before I let you go. I appreciate all the time. When you were on the show the last time, we were kind of a little worried about the CFL. The state of the CFL a few years ago was kind of in dire straits. My God, I watched the Grey Cup final last year. How could you have a more scintillating ending than that with a blocked field goal? What's the state of it in your eyes now, Rod? I think it's been a couple of years since we talked.
I think it's a little early to answer that question because they're in training camp. Today is day 4 of training camp.
Okay.
I think the first season kickoff game is May 27th. Let's see what the attendance is at those games. Okay. I'm concerned about this US TV deal they have with CBS Sports Network. I mean, I get it, but it's not every game. If not every game is available in America, that's going to disturb me greatly. When you and I talked, they had wiped out the CFL season. They're one of the few pro leagues to wipe themselves out. The XFL did it. The USFL wasn't going yet. But are you minor league or are you big league? I guess from what I talked to my friends in the CFL, they're still getting a paycheck. They're still going to work every day. So if that's your barometer or baseline for how they're doing, they survived. But are they thriving? I don't know. Let's look at those stadiums when the season opens and how many people are buying tickets, because that'll be the decider.
All right. He's Rod Pedersen, host of the Rod Pedersen Show. You can see him on the Game Plus TV network, also on their YouTube channel. Rod, as always, this has been an absolute treat. Enjoy the Stanley Cup finals and the playoffs, and keep doing what you're doing. Enjoy that Florida weather. This time of year, I'm not so jealous, but 8 or 9 months out of the year, I am, man. Thanks a lot, eh?
The summer makes up for the winter, for sure. All right, Lou. Good seeing you, man. Thank you.
You bet. All right. Thank you. Rod Pedersen from the Rod Pedersen Show. Kind enough to join us here. If you get a chance, watch him 12 to 2 every day. You can watch him on their YouTube channel, the Rod Pedersen Show on YouTube, and also, as mentioned, Game Plus TV network. Great insight on the Stanley Cup playoffs, which are going to start tomorrow with Florida against Carolina, and then Friday the Eastern Conference Finals. It's going to be Dallas at Vegas. Really looking forward to those Final Fours. A lot to talk about with that coming up again on Friday. We'll have Game 1 to talk about between Carolina and Florida. So again, thanks to Rod Pedersen from the Rod Pedersen Show joining us here on the Captain Lou Extravaganza. Hey, what do you think? Who do you think is going to win the Stanley Cup? That'll be our poll question coming up for Friday. We got a couple of minutes left on our poll question right now from Monday, which was from the NFC North, the win totals. Who's got the best shot at winning or getting over on their win totals? Detroit at 9.5, Minnesota at 8.5, or Green Bay and Chicago at 7.5. Those courtesy of DraftKings. So, well, the NHL playoffs are going on now with the Stanley Cup Final Four, as we mentioned. We had an opportunity that we're going to play an interview that we had yesterday with Ryan Shuilling. He's a producer for 630 KNOW in Denver. We've talked about this in the past with the transfer portal with college football, and also Coach Prime at Colorado, the impact that he's made and the impact with NIL, and also with the transfer portal. We're going to we're going to play that interview with Ryan Shuilling here and also get his insight on the Denver Nuggets and the LA Lakers. Now, this was taped yesterday before Game 1 again. You'll notice that towards the end of the interview. But we had a chance to sit down with Ryan, a friend of the show. He's been on before. We look forward to that. But first, we want to talk to you a little bit about MahlerBros.com. Mahler Bros, of course, one of our sponsors here on the Captain Lou Sports Network, Captain Lou Extravaganza. You know, we want to remind you that when you're golfing and the sun's beating down, all you want to do is take your shirt off. You're sweating, your game kind of is suffering, but you want to take your shirt off because of the heat. You're miserable. Well, you know you can't do that on the golf course, but we've got just the answer for you. That's Mahler Bros Golf. MahlerBrosGolf.com has a large catalog of polos with designs for those of you that may want the loud design. If you're one of those walking down, the third hole, and they're looking for it on you at the 7th tee, you want to be noticed, or if you like me, a little more of a sleek design, kind of a conservative look, that's MahlerBros.com. They've got it all. They've got T-shirts, tumblers, Yeti cups, you name it. MahlerBros.com. And when you go on the website, use the promo code BELLYUP for 15% off at checkout. MahlerBros.com. Remember, if you look good, you feel good. You feel good, you play good. It's all right up here. That's MahlerBros.com. And use the promo code BELLYUP for 15% off of your purchase. So there you go. And as I mentioned, we had an opportunity to talk with Ryan Shuilling. He is the executive producer at 630 KNOW in Denver. They're right in the middle of the Prime experience, the Coach Prime experience with the Colorado Buffaloes. And we had a chance to talk to him about that. And a topic that we've kind of touched on a little bit earlier in the year with the transfer portal, it's really changing the look of college sports along with NIL. Let's bring you that interview we had with Ryan Shuilling yesterday. Sports, and we're excited to bring in a past guest on our show a few years ago now. It's been, I believe, Ryan Shuilling. He's a former local personality here in the Michigan area, now out as an executive producer out in Denver, out in Coach Prime country. We thought we'd have him come in, talk a little bit about that. And of course, the Denver Nuggets, who are in the midst of a nice run in the NBA playoffs. Ryan, first of all, thanks for coming on.
You got it, Lou. Absolutely. And as you can see, I'm decked out in my Nuggets gear, and I don't want Detroit fans to fear too much. I've assimilated on 3 of 4 fronts. You know, I can root for the Nuggets. I can root for the Rockies. I can even root for the Broncos, but I will never, ever root for the Avalanche. So just know that.
That a boy. That's what I like to hear. It didn't break my heart to see them get knocked out in round 1 against the Kraken. That's for sure. Ryan, I want to touch on quite a few things here while we've got you for the amount of time we do. A couple of weeks ago, in the college world, you're familiar obviously with Michigan State. The transfer portal reared its ugly head around here, but nobody, I think, in the country has taken advantage more from a football standpoint than the Colorado Buffaloes. First, getting Coach Prime, he told all his players to pack their bags if they didn't like it. First of all, what has it been like with the show that Coach Prime has brought to the Colorado Buffaloes?
He's a force of personality, Lou. I mean, there's just no way to ignore him, but it's not all about him. I think, when you and I were growing up, we remember prime time and, the bandanas and the flair and the commercials and the gear and all that. He has really reverted back, and I don't know that he ever really left, to an old school mentality as a coach. You can see a lot of Bobby Bowden coming through in him, and I know that Bobby Bowden's a personal hero of his. And I'm telling you, Lou, the way he's running that program, it's old school. You better get in line. You better pull in the same direction or you're gone. And 18 players have left the program. And I don't think that phases Dion at all. He wants his kind of guys in there. He knows what his kind of guy looks like, what kind of player that is. And it's a fever pitch scenario. I mean, imagine this, Lou. Imagine either Michigan or Michigan State go 1-11. Well, first of all, the fans would be in revolt.
Oh, boy.
And secondly, the interest in the program would be in serious question, right? Season ticket sales, donors, all these sort of things. The season has been sold out for the CU Buffs. This is a 1-11 team, I remind you, because of the force of Deion Sanders, the hope, the excitement he brings. Lou, the spring game was more like a winter game here. It was about 30 degrees.
Yeah.
That's sold out. So, yeah, you can't really measure, I don't think, the excitement about this program. I would temper expectations a little bit in year one. I would say if Colorado went 6-6, got themselves into a bowl game as bowl eligible, that would be a massive victory for Deion. But I'm not going to sell him short. With the Pac-12 and everything reformulating, you got USC, UCLA leaving, so that'll be happening soon. Yeah, who knows? The door is wide open for somebody like Deion in Colorado to make an imprint. Now, how long he stays here, that's another question. There's bound to be, I think, another job for him at some point. Could be in 2 years, could be in 4. Yeah. But yeah, definitely, it's crazy here in Boulder right now.
Well, it makes me think a little bit about how apprehensive are some of the fans out there, because we all know what Mel Tucker did to Colorado. He split after 1 year, I believe it was, or maybe 2. And now he's here at Michigan State with that fat contract of his. And, is there any apprehension at all from the fan base?
Yeah, that's a good question, Lou. I think they've got to be a little bit gun shy, but I think it's more they kind of know what they're getting going in, right? It's Deion. He's the big name. He's going to be in demand. If they succeed here, that's a win-win. That's good for Colorado, and it'll be good for Deion. I think they felt jilted by Mel Tucker. I think they really honestly felt, and I know some of the donors here and the big-time alums, they thought Mel Tucker was a lifetime hire the way that maybe he is going to be assigning at Michigan State there. And he had a dinner, a gathering with donors the night before he announced he was leaving for Michigan State here, and that did not go over well. I think it was just baseline expectations were way different. They thought Mel was here to stay, or at least for the foreseeable future. He kind of left in the middle of the night. Deion comes in. I think they accept the fact that he might use this as a springboard. But again, if he does, that will have meant that Colorado went from 1-11 to a successful program.
Well, I know, like you mentioned, the expectations maybe this year need to be tempered a little bit. I looked at the start of their schedule out there. Texas, TCU to start out with, I believe. Then they've got Oregon and USC in their first 5 games. Obviously, a rivalry game with Colorado State. But I looked at it, and quite honestly, Ryan, if they can get, 2-3, 1-4, they can get to 7 wins. I really believe that. But I also got to tell you, 22-point favorite or underdog, I might put a little shackles taking the points, because it'll see what with his son at quarterback. You don't know what to expect, and I think that's going to make it fun for me to watch, anyways.
Well, and I don't think Dion would have it any other way, Lou. Like you said, they're at TCU, defending playoff team that made it to the championship game that beat Michigan, which I was shocked by the way.
Yeah.
But then, like you mentioned, I mean, they're home against Nebraska, winnable game. That's a program in flux after moving on from Scott Frost. Colorado State's a rivalry game, but that'll be in Boulder, and they should be favored in that one. At Oregon's tough. That's opening the conference slate. But then you're right. After that, I think they're running downhill in a lot of ways. There's some teams, again, in Stanford being one of them. They're coming here to Boulder that, again, are in flux the same way that Colorado is. But it doesn't seem like the program at Stanford or Nebraska or anywhere else is coming off a season as horrible as Colorado had. It has as much positive energy, enthusiasm, excitement behind it as Colorado does.
Well, I want to talk to you a little bit about the transfer portal. I mean, you're a Michigan State guy, and it hit hard. I mean, it's hit hard for Michigan, but not quite to the extent that maybe it did for Michigan State. We're still waiting to find out where Keon Coleman's going to go, and it could be anywhere, whoever I think ponies up the most money. Now, this is a new animal for us, Ryan. I mean, again, you mentioned how, we're kind of old school back in the day, watching football back in the 80s and 90s, whatever. It's something I think that we've got to embrace. If not, we're going to be out of luck. I don't know if I like it, but I'm kind of learning to come to grips with it. But what are your feelings on the transfer portal and, the NIL money situation?
I've always been rather progressive on this, and that might surprise some who know my politics. But with the players, you go back to the O'Bannon case, right? And that's kind of the landmark case in this whole deal. And even before that, with the Fab Five, Lou, I remember going on campus. I was born in Ann Arbor. I grew up near there. And during the Fab Five era, those guys were a little bit older than me. Yeah. And you go to the M-Den or other places on campus there in Ann Arbor around the quad and whatnot, and there'd be number 4, number 5 jerseys. You knew who they were, but they didn't have the names on them, but they would sell them as if they did. Chris Webber didn't see any of that money. Now he did from Ed Martin, but Jalen Rose didn't see any of that money. Juwan Howard didn't see any of his number 25 money. I always thought that was incredibly unfair. These are schools and the NCAA is an organization making millions. I'm talking millions of dollars off of these players. And the argument always was, well, they're getting a free education. Well, they are, and they deserve that scholarship. They've earned that scholarship. But anything above and beyond that, where you market them specifically, individually, absolutely they should get a cut of that. Now, there should be a process to it, much like we've seen with Olympic athletes who maintain their college eligibility. They've been able to do that. And so I've always been in favor of the name, image, and likeness availability to players. Now, with that, like you mentioned, comes the freedom of the transfer portal. And although we as fans don't like it, I mean, I was shocked to see Peyton Thorne enter the transfer portal. Now he's gone to Auburn. I did not see that coming. Keon Coleman, another one. That's a gut punch. I think I can understand that one a bit more. There are rumors that Florida State might be in the lead for his services. But again, I think I come back to the square, Lou, of this is something that empowers the players. And they get more of a say in their future, where they can go, who they can play for. And it balances the ledger. It used to be once a player signed, I mean, you were basically the property of that school until you finished. And now they've got some opportunities there. And I think as long as those opportunities they're governed, they're well maintained by the NCAA, the rules are enforced, and it's a level playing field for everybody, then like you, I think we got to kind of adapt to it. I know Tom Izzo's made comments. He doesn't like it, but you got to utilize it. Yeah. And it can benefit you. It can cut you, like it did Michigan State football here. Now, Mel Tucker's got to go back into that portal, Lou, and he's got to pull out a guy like he did a couple of years ago in Kenneth Walker. That changed everything. Yeah, you bring Kenneth Walker in from Wake Forest, and now all of a sudden they're a New Year's Six bowl team that wins a game in the Peach Bowl against Pitt because they got a dynamic player. So the portal giveth and it taketh away, and at least right now it's ebbing for Michigan State in a bad way, and I don't know if they're going to be able to recover from it in time for this upcoming season. It's going to be tough.
Well, my worry, Ryan, with the NIL situation is, and I'm going to use Michigan State as an example, and they're not one that has. They don't have. Well, I know it's a short reign for a tradition of doling out a lot of money, but my worry is you're going to get some guys that you recruit that are 3 or 4 stars, and they're only going to be able to keep them for 1 year because you're going to see a school like, I don't know, USC or Miami or whatever, offer them money that, that it's going to be too hard to refuse. And I always use the Mike Wilbon example he had a few months back where he said, who are you to tell me how much I can't give a recruit if I want him to come to Northwestern? I'm a little worried about the haves and the have-nots. And I don't know the answer right now to regulate how much NIL money somebody's going to be able to get. That's my only worry about that. I'm with you on the transfer portal. They have the right to go. Coaches can do it, but what is your thinking on the NIL situation?
Oh, there's always going to be downside, Lou, and you just pointed to it. And I think you're absolutely right. I don't disagree that it does create this kind of hierarchy, right, of these schools that have the means and then those that don't. But we've already seen that play out. I think with the playoff expansion in football, from football derives everything else, as you are very well aware in college athletics. But to give an opportunity, to guarantee an opportunity to a mid-major type school, that if they are in the rankings at such and such a point, they are going to get into the playoff. That's a remedy that needed to be had, because hand in hand with what you just said, and then the way that the playoff was working, I was a proponent, Lou, of you got FCS, you got FBS, and there needed to be a division in between that contained mid-majors like Central Michigan, Eastern Michigan, the MAC schools, the Sun Belt schools. So they had an opportunity, a real one, to compete for a championship. I think the playoff dynamic, again, by expanding, changes that a little bit. As far as the gap, right, between the more affluent schools and the ones that aren't, in a way, I'm very cynical about this, in that the only thing that's changed is it's out in the open now. I mean, we know there were Instagram posts for years. Remember Nick Saban, Alabama, guys down there driving Hummers and stuff. Like, come on, how did they get the money for that? We know. It's just the SEC played by a different set of rules. You could replace the S and SEC with a dollar sign. So now it's a little bit more fair, and that other schools can kind of play again on that same level playing field. But you're right, there's an absolute downside to these smaller schools that are not as much of means. They don't have as high powered of donors, and they can't facilitate those NIL deals the way that some of the bigger, more powerful, more wealthy schools can.
Yeah, and I can remember talking to players that played in the 70s that would come in after a game and open up their locker, and there'd be a sock in there, and it wasn't just for a fresh pair of socks to wear to the dance that night. There was go to the dance and maybe get a pizza or two afterwards. We're Ryan Shuilling, executive producer out at 630 KNOW in Denver, joining us here on the Captain Lou Extravaganza. Ryan, your Denver Nuggets, as the time this airs on Wednesday, game one will already be in the books, but we're still going to treat this like we're previewing it. Wow. First of all, I feel like the Nuggets are the team that everybody forgets about. You're obviously in the Mountain Time Zone. You don't get the coverage that, the Lakers or the Knicks or whoever get. But I believe, number one, that your dynamic duo of Murray and Jokic are vastly underrated. They get their chance to shine now. Everybody's pointing to the matchup with AD and Jokic as being, the prominent one. Who wins that one may win the series. What is your take on that? What is something I should look for in this series that could help elevate Denver to the finals? And number two, what's the temperature in Denver with this Western Conference final? Is everybody geeked up for it?
Well, let me put it this way. One of the shows I produce is an afternoon drive show here in the Mountain Time Zone, which is from 4 to 6 p.m. The game starts about 6:30 our time, 8:30 your time in the East Time Zone. And our show host is one of the more prominent lawyers in Denver. He has season tickets to the Nuggets. He's leaving his own show early to go to the games 1 and 2, both Tuesday night and Thursday night. So that gives you a little bit of the flavor. I think the Nuggets are the forgotten team in this city because they've never had success. Lou, we as Pistons fans, we've suffered a lot lately. But the Pistons have made it to the NBA Finals. The Pistons have won 3 NBA titles. The Nuggets, since the merger of the ABA and the NBA in the 70s, they've never even made it to the finals. And when they have made it to the West Finals, 4 of those 5 times, Lou, they've lost to the Lakers. So this is a very significant matchup in that way. I think, Denver, you make a good point. I mean, you talk about flyover country within flyover country. In the Mountain Time Zone, this is the only team that exists in that time zone. in the mountain with Denver. So you're right. It kind of gets lost in the shuffle between the West Coast games and the East Coast games. And the Nuggets don't get a lot of national play. They have in recent years. Nikola Jokic has certainly been a part of that, and he should have gotten the MVP again, in my opinion. But yeah, his matchup with AD is going to be enormous. Depending on who the Lakers decide to assign defensively and Jamal Murray, I'm going to be watching for that, because Murray has blossomed in these playoffs in a way that I think people always thought was possible, but injuries have really limited him, set him back. Had an ACL tear, had to have that repaired. Had a pretty good playoff in the bubble a few years ago. It seems like a lifetime ago. But Michael Porter Jr., that's the name to keep an eye on. This is a guy who's a superstar caliber player. He has played like it at times in these playoffs. And while he's kind of third in the ranking, if you will, behind Jokic and Murray, he can play on that level. And he's gotten off to some fast starts that have led to wins. I think offensively they need him to really shine. And a familiar name to Pistons fans, Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, KCP. Had some pretty rotten years in Detroit for the most part, but he has found a very important role with Denver, and he has really led the charge to this team becoming more of a defensive presence. And Lou, that's what Mike Malone, who's the son of former Pistons assistant Brendan Malone, so a lot of tie-ins here.
Yeah, great.
He's been really stressing and driving home the fact they got to defend. There's been several games in these playoffs where they've had 3 really good quarters and 1 horrible quarter defensively. And at times it's cost them. It's cost them games. It's cost them wins. But they played extremely well in their home court. I think they've got to take these first 2 to set the tone in the series. They could still win the series if they drop 1 of 2. But in order to kind of assert their dominance, which they should, this is a series, Lou, that the Nuggets should probably win in 5 games. They're clearly more talented. They're clearly deeper
100%.
Than the Lakers. And LeBron, he's getting up there in age. I don't know how much more of this playoff toll his body can take, but a lot of good kind of complementary parts on this Nuggets team. Aaron Gordon is a very good defender in the low block. His help on AD and forcing others to beat them in the forward positions for the Lakers is going to be big. So I would say it's a team effort for Denver. When they're firing on all cylinders, it's a balanced attack, and it'll be very difficult for the Lakers to stop.
Last question for you. I appreciate you taking time out today. I know you got to get ready for work. A poll question coming into today is NFL related. In the NFC North, the win totals were out based on the schedule release and whatnot. Our question is, which team do you think has the best chance of going over their win totals? And I'm going to give them to you.
Okay.
Detroit, their over-under is 9.5, and they're minus 105 on that. Minnesota is 8.5, and they're plus 100. And then the Packers, they're minus 130. The Packers and the Bears are both at 7.5. The over-under. Give me your best. If you were to have to make a choice of those 4, what team do you think has the best chance of going over their win-loss prediction for 2023?
Well, I'll start with, I do have the Lions over that total. So I predict they'll go 11-6. But you said 9.5?
9.5, yep.
That's a pretty narrow margin. I would still bet it, but I think of what you announced there, you said Minnesota 8.5.
Yeah.
I would go with them. I would think the Vikings are the best bet to go over. I still think they're the favorites in the division until proven otherwise. They haven't lost a whole lot. They've got one of the best receivers in football. They got a solid quarterback, got a good running game. They got a pretty good defense. I think a lot of people are kind of got their eye on the Bears, and I think for good reason this year. To go over 7.5, maybe. I would say the best bet to go under is Packers. I think the Packers are going to have a down year. They lose Aaron Rodgers. I don't think Jordan Love's ready. Not at all. Not even close. But a lot of reason for optimism with the Lions. But I'll take the Vikings as most likely to go over the over-under win total you gave.
Okay. It's hard for me to – it's been 30 years since the Lions have had this big of expectations after 91 when they went to the championship game.
Right.
I'm loving the fact that Detroit's getting recognition and they're on 4 times on national TV, not counting Thanksgiving. Well, I don't know how to act. It's been I don't know how to act on it. I mean, I know they got a tough go with Kansas City with the opening game, but I love it. I like what Mike Florio said. that game was going to draw huge numbers no matter who they put in that opening game. I'm glad they gave it to Detroit to showcase it. But, boy, my excitement right now is at an all-time high. I know I drink the Kool-Aid every year, but I don't know how you feel.
Well, I kind of had mixed emotions coming out of that draft, Lou. I was puzzled by picking Jahmyr Gibbs, and he might turn out to be a superstar. I'm not going to shortchange him. But if the thought process was running back there, and that's fine, why not just stay where they were and take Bijan Robinson, the guy you know is the number one? That's the kind of the solid, highest floor bet. You want a high floor guy at that point in the draft. Now, they did trade back, and they did add a pick, and they did get a player that maybe they feel fit best. They really had a solid reaction to DeAndre Swift and his future with the team. They were out on Swift. They are in on Gibbs. The Jack Campbell pick puzzled me. I mean, I know they were picking there for need. They do need a middle linebacker that can anchor that defense, and that's not Anzalone. And Campbell fit the profile, but according to many different sources, I'm talking reliable ones, not just Mel Kiper Jr. Who the hell is Mel Kiper Jr.? Remember the famous quote. Right. But Pro Football Focus, all these very highly acclaimed outlets that rank players had Campbell about 40 spots lower. So I've been told, I've seen reports out of there in Detroit that he had the best little rookie mini camp there, and I'm encouraged by that. He still can be a very fine player. I like the Lions mid-round picks a lot more. Maybe that's a good sign. I was a big fan of Brian Branch.
Oh, me too.
To trade up and get him. Value at that point in the draft on the board was solid, and it was a position of need, obviously, in safety. And I'm very high, Lou, on Hendon Hooker. If it doesn't work out with Goff, and it very well might, I'm high on Jared Goff. I'm fine with Jared Goff. But to have a backup who has upside like Hooker, once he comes back from the knee surgery and the injury there, he's got time to develop. He's got the 2 years that we still have Goff under contract. I'm excited about the potential of him. So you look at that, some of the free agent acquisitions that Detroit had, they were aggressive. You know, they had the setback with the gambling issue, which I wanted to hit my head against this brick wall here after that happened. But Jameson Williams comes back. He adds that dynamic option to the offense. I think they're cooking with gas, Lou. I think there's reason to be optimistic. This team has an identity now. They have a confidence, a swagger. They have a family kind of atmosphere in place with Dan Campbell. And I think the sky's the limit. Again, I don't go around like you, Lou. Optimism and me with the Lions don't go hand in hand. It's been 30 years, like you said. Yeah. But I feel pretty strongly looking at the schedule going, I see 11 wins there. It may or may not be enough to win the division. I think, again, Minnesota's the favorite. But I think they're a playoff team. They should have been a playoff team last year, but, the math got to them. The Rams got jobbed against the Seahawks. Yeah. Some things didn't happen their way. And they started 1-6, so they were behind the 8 ball to begin with. I think they got off to a much better start this year. And I think if they make the playoffs, potentially host and win a playoff game, that would be a tremendous accomplishment. But just to get in, I think would be a positive step and a reason to feel good about the Lions.
Ryan Shuilling, I appreciate you taking time out today. I know you're busy. I'll let you get going. Hey, enjoy the Western Conference Finals. Let's hope that the Nuggets can get to the finals for the first time and maybe pull one off. I know it'll make for a lot of fun there in the Denver area. Thank you so much.
Thanks, Lou. Appreciate it. I know all the Pistons fans will be rooting against the Lakers in this series, too, so I appreciate that, too. Good talking to you.
All right. All right. That, of course, Ryan Shuilling from 630 KNOW, executive producer out in Denver, getting his thoughts on not only the transfer portal, Coach Prime out in Buffalo. That's going to be an interesting watch, the circus that he brings. Now, yes, he's old school, that being Deion Sanders, and he's going to bring the accountability factor, but there's always that question with him. How long is he going to stay? Now, if he does bring success there for a year or two, as long as the expectation is there for the Colorado Buffalo fan base that he may exit after a couple of years, because, I don't know. But he's definitely changing the outlook in college football, because if he is successful with the transfer portal, kind of like what LSU did in women's basketball, then who knows what it's going to bring as far as the landscape in college football. So that's going to be a fun watch. And of course, love his insight on the NBA playoffs, Western Conference Final, and kind of a viewpoint from the Denver perspective, as those, it seems like all the ink is with LA, all the pub, LA, and then of course the East Coast with the Knicks in Philadelphia and Miami. Denver, it's like you said, they're kind of a flyover kind of a situation. The only team left in the Mountain Time Zone. And as we saw last night, they took game 1 against the Los Angeles Lakers. And I got to tell you, that was a fantastic game last night. Jokic, he proved that he should have been the MVP, but he had a hell of a game. My hat's off to Anthony Davis. 40-point game for him. I thought LeBron played well. A couple of questionable decisions at the end, but, it was a 20-point lead in the third quarter, and I turned it for a couple of moments and came back. I looked back at it, and I thought, wow, this is a close game, and it was there to be had for the Lakers. So there's 2 ways to look at this. If you're a Lakers fan, first and foremost, as a fan, how do you feel? Did they blow their chance to steal game 1 after that comeback? They just quite couldn't get over the hump. They cut it to 1 a couple of times, but they just couldn't quite get over that. Or do you feel, we found out what we can do to stay with them and bring it into game 2? Obviously, the objective, if you're a road team, is you want to split the first couple of games. You got to win one sooner or later on Denver's court if you're the Lakers, if you want to go to the finals. That's obvious. But it's a lot easier if you split the first 2 games because you've got home court. You get that momentum, you can go back to LA and potentially get a couple of games there. You're up 3-1. You go back to LA down 2-0, then you got to win 4 out of the next 5. And that's pretty darn difficult, as we found in pro sports. It's not impossible, but it's very darn difficult to do it. So it's going to be an interesting watch. Game 2 tomorrow night, but what a game last night. Jokic again. What did he have? 33, 21, and 14 or something ridiculous like that. Unbelievable. He's definitely the real deal. Who is LA going to get to stop him? And but if you're Denver, I was watching Scott Hastings in an interview earlier this morning, and he said that's kind of Denver's been their MO all year. They get a big lead, they hang on. So I don't know who you're going to get on Denver's side to kind of contain Anthony Davis. Now, I know Reeves had 22, but I just think that the talent depth it kind of showed a little bit on Denver's side in game 1. So we'll have to wait and see on game 2, but this is going to be a 6 or a 7 game series. And the question that I asked earlier this week, and I've asked other guests, is, with the 2 semifinal games in the conference semifinals with the series rather, with LA and Golden State, and with Philly and Boston, those were marquee matchups. Those were the quote unquote teams, the spotlight teams. Were there going to be a letdown, with maybe with the Denver and LA? I'll tell you, if game 1 was any indication, this is going to be a fantastic series. And I really look forward to watching game 2 tomorrow night. Now it's going to be pitted up against the Eastern Conference Finals. So my attention will most likely be on Stanley Cup action, but I will be flipping the channel a little bit to kind of keep an eye on that LA-Denver series. And, of course, game 1 starts tonight in the Eastern Conference Final. It's Boston and it's Miami. It starts obviously in Boston. Okay, number one, you're going to say, is there going to be a letdown? Is there going to be, is momentum, again, we talked about it with Rod Pedersen from the Rod Pedersen Show on the NHL playoffs. Florida playing with house money, but they proved that they belong there. I could see one series, maybe you could call it a fluke, like with Florida against the Boston Bruins. They won game 2 against Toronto in convincing fashion. That wasn't a squeaker 3-2 overtime game in game 7. That was a domination over a Toronto team that was on paper anyway, more superiorly talented. Now with the Miami Heat, they took care of Milwaukee in 7 games. That was a close series. Now there are some that are going to say injuries may have played a factor, but that's no excuse in my book, because I think Miami, they could have the argument they lost a couple of starters. Tyler Hero and Oladipo are gone. They squeaked by in that series. Then they took on the Knicks. They handled New York. It's not a fluke anymore. When you get to the Final Four, I don't care. It's like Rod said, I don't care who you are. You've got to be good. Miami, in my opinion, has got one of the best, if not the best coaches left, in Eric Spoelstra. And he's got 48 hours now to kind of figure out Boston. And can Jason Tatum keep up what he did on Sunday? That's obviously not going to be able to, but can he take over a series by himself? Will Jaylen Brown be what kind of an impact is the supporting cast of Miami going to have? Again, those are questions that are going to be answered starting tonight. It's going to be an interesting series there. I've got Boston ultimately winning that one, but I could see that one going 7. I had Denver winning the series in 7 games. So I think they're both going to go to the distance. I think it's going to be a fantastic Western Conference and Eastern Conference final. Can't wait to watch it. A couple other quick notes on the NBA, and we'll wrap things up. The Victor Wembanyama sweepstakes, I know I'm pronouncing it wrong, which I guess you could call the NBA lottery, was held yesterday, and the San Antonio Spurs were the lucky ones. I tell you, my Detroit Pistons, our Detroit teams can't catch a break. We can't get the luck of the draw. Now, I know the Pistons won the lottery a couple of years ago to get Cade Cunningham. Victor Wembanyama, he's the rage. I mean, they had Brian Windhorst out in France to interview him afterwards. San Antonio got him. How long is it going to be before San Antonio is going to be in the picture? But how is he going to handle the pressure? That's my question. Now he's dominating over there. 7'4", plays like a point guard, great defensively. Is he going to be the next best thing? Or with all due respect, is he going to be another Imani Bates, who was supposedly the next best thing here in Michigan a few years ago? And he's in the rookie camp, the rookie tryout camp in the NBA as a freshman. I mean, now Imani's only 19 years old, but I don't know. I mean, that is what I want to keep an eye on. And, as far as 2 through 5 right now in this draft, it didn't matter. I think that you're going to get still a decent player, at least in the top 3 or 4, a difference maker. But congratulations to this San Antonio Spurs. They won the lottery. They get Victor Wembanyama, unless some crazy thing happens with the draft. I doubt it, with trades or whatever, but he's going to be a San Antonio Spur, just like David Robinson, and why does his name escape me right now? Got the Wake Forest center. As soon as I get off the air, I'm going to forget. I knew I should have wrote it down. Tim Duncan. There we go. Just like Tim Duncan. So, they've got an interesting core to work around him in San Antonio. You've got, Greg Popovich is going to be 74 years old. Will this keep him there a few more years? If he wouldn't have won the sweepstakes, would he think about retiring? We'll see how long he sticks around. So a lot of things to think about with San Antonio with the coming draft, with them getting the number 1 pick. And finally, Doc Rivers. We talked about it on Monday. Who is to blame in Philadelphia? Well, to nobody's surprise, he's out. And, the thing is, now you've got, all the stories you hear was Harden. It was, Harden that said he wanted him out. Now, what if Harden leaves? What's next in Philadelphia? You got to believe, in my heart of hearts, I think Joel Embiid probably had something to do with this too. They probably went to him there, but Philadelphia is a mess right now. With James Harden, you don't know what he's going to do. He's probably going to opt out of his contract. He's going to want more money, obviously. There's rumors of him going to Houston. Maybe they've got $60 million in cap space. Now, we all know my feelings on Doc Rivers. 33 games where he has lost clinching games in Game 7, or he's clinching games for that matter. And, he's rode the wave of that Boston championship that's been, 14, 15 years ago now. He's a great regular season coach, just cannot get over the hump in Philadelphia. But, boy, there's going to be a lot of coaches lining up to take that job. You're going to have Mike Budenholzer, Monty Williams, Nick Nurse. How about, and then the rumor I heard, if Harden stays, Mike D'Antoni. They take Mike D'Antoni. I mean, I love the guy. Nice guy. Great interview. But what has he done? If I was Budenholzer, I'd take that job as a Detroit Pistons fan. I hope not. I'd love to get him. I don't think he's going to go to Detroit because I think Detroit's kind of I don't know. But Doc Rivers out in Philadelphia, not surprised. We'll see what happens there. So, well, hey, wow. What a fun show today. We had some great guests, great conversation. Really want to thank Ryan Shuilling, producer at 630 KNOW in Denver, giving us his thoughts on the Denver Nuggets and also on the transfer portal, and Coach Prime at Colorado with the Buffaloes, taking over that program, what that's going to bring, the excitement that's going to bring to Colorado, see if he can inject some life there. And, of course, Rod Pedersen from the Rod Pedersen Show. He's been around the hockey world a long time. Great insight with him on what to expect in the Stanley Cup finals in each conference, with Florida against Carolina and, of course, with Vegas against Dallas. Thanks to Rod for coming on. He just celebrated his 1,000th show. I invite you to check the Rod Pedersen Show out, noon to 2 on the Game Plus Network, also on his YouTube channel as well. So we want to thank both those gentlemen for coming on. Friday on the show, we're going to have Mitch Bernstein on. He is our baseball insider. The MLB network, the MLB is at the quarter pole. Memorial Day is right about their 1/4 of the way through the measuring stick, if you will. It's Memorial Day, 4th of July, Labor Day, of course, and then the end of the year. But 40 games in now for these teams. We want to get Mitch on Friday, talk about a variety of things going on, from the pitch clock, the new rules, the big teams, Tampa Bay off to a great start. We'll talk about his Phillies, what's going on in both leagues, and we'll get his take on the quote-unquote cheating scandal, which I don't think it's much of a scandal, but we'll get his thoughts on what's going on with Aaron Judge and the Toronto Blue Jays. And we want to look back on a character in an umpire, Don Demkinger, who passed away earlier this week. Of course, for those of you that are kind of newer to the game, the younger crowd, you may not remember, but he was the controversial umpire in 1985 with the Kansas City Royals and the St. Louis Cardinals, who made that call that definitely was wrong. And, you know, what happened with him afterwards with the death threats and everything. What a crazy turn of events for him. But he was a great umpire. He passed away. We'll get Mitch's thoughts on that. But always great to talk to Mitch. If you like baseball, tune into our show Friday morning at 10 o'clock. We'll have a great interview and a lot of great dialogue on Major League Baseball. And we'll get his take on the Philadelphia sports scene with the Flyers and with the Phillies, and, of course, with the 76ers, with their situation now, looking for a new head coach. All right, everybody, we want to thank everybody at Belly Up Sports for, again, allowing us to be a part of their network. Always a good time. And without them, you know, we wouldn't be able to do this. And obviously, without you, we wouldn't be able to have this program. And I really appreciate you taking time out of your schedule to watch us here on the Captain Lou Sports Network on YouTube. Subscribe to our channel. We've got all of our shows on archive. And again, if you missed any of the show, you can go back and watch it. We will be downloading it on podcast form on Spotify and Apple Podcasts. Wherever you get your podcasts, it will be available later on this afternoon. We invite you to check it out there. So, all right, that's going to do it. We want to thank everybody again for joining us. For Ryan Shuilling and for Rod Pedersen, yours truly, Captain Lou, saying keep your heads up, keep your sticks down, keep your feet moving, and as always, keep your minds open. Enjoy your day, everybody. We'll talk to you Friday here on the Captain Lou Extravaganza here on the Captain Lou Sports Network. So long.